we have a very special guest that I'd like to invite up to say a couple of words. And to give you a little bit of background, so he is a physician who is very, very passionate about improving patient care. In fact, he's so passionate that he is actually the director of I'm blanking on it, That's right, Diagnostic Excellence Initiative of the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. And today we had a lot of guests, including some from industry and academia. And I guess one category of guest, right, that's been in the background, but that doesn't really get acknowledged is, well, philanthropic guests, right? Philanthropy is extremely important in funding a lot of the work that's being done in AI, both at Stanford and at many other institutions. And so I wanted to invite Daniel up to actually say a few words and officially conclude our gathering for today.
All right. Hi, everyone. First of all, a few just faux pas I'm breaking here in the Bay Area. First, I have a computer up here. I kind of missed the days of Zoom meetings where you could strategically place your notes right under the camera, and so it looks like you're reading them. I mean, not reading them, but I do have my notes here. And two, I just realized that the less prepared you are to give a presentation in the Bay Area, the better dressed you are. So I realized if you're coming in jeans and a T-shirt, you know business, and if you're coming in a full suit, you're not very prepared. So forgive me there. I think the last time I wore a necktie was when I was interviewing for residency at UCSF. So I'm the director of a patient care program, which is at the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, which is a private foundation based just down the road at Palo Alto, Page Mill Road. And we're focused on improving diagnostic outcomes for patients in the United States. That includes safe, effective, efficient, timely, patient-centered, and equitable outcomes. Within that portfolio, we have a group of grants that look at the role of new technology to improve diagnosis, especially as it applies to improving clinical diagnostic decision-making. And so what that means is an unofficial part of my job is attending a lot of these clinical AI conferences. And so I think in a way, I was invited up here as a connoisseur of these clinical AI conferences to reflect on what I saw was very impactful about this particular meeting. So one, I was not paid to say this, but this meeting is always one of the highlights for me in my conference circuit that I attend. And what makes it such a successful meeting is two metrics. First, my brain hurts. The variety of topics that were covered in a short period of time is really quite amazing. And the second is a subjective metric I use, which is actionable insight to word ratio. And so more insight, fewer words, more impact, a better score. And so what we really heard today in these lightning talks was just covering a huge amount of both breadth as well as depth in a half day. And so it's been a very efficient use of my time and hopefully for you as well. I also wanted to really congratulate the organizers, the faculty staff, the staff that made this all happen, and all of the speakers to make this such a successful event. So just please welcome me in congratulating all of you. And so finally, I was asked to just give some really key insights that I got out of today's meeting. So in the first set of talks, what I heard was identifying what could AI do in healthcare. So we heard from Greg Corrado, the first milestone that we learned was how to teach machines how to see what humans see. And so from that, we saw algorithms that were able to detect diabetic retinopathy in scans, as well as many other applications, dermatology and detecting skin lesions, et cetera. The second milestone we heard about was being able to teach machines to see what we cannot see. And so that includes being able to detect atrial fibrillation in a patient with a normal sinus rhythm EKG, or being able to identify sex in a retinopathy image or race in a CT scan. This also allows humans to interpret vast amounts of information that would not otherwise we'd be able to interpret within a single day, a single year, or just a lifetime of experiences. And what we also heard were just kind of future-facing opportunities in which these AI algorithms can identify patient trajectories and even identify differential impact of therapy A versus therapy B. The next theme that I heard from the next set of talks is really about, so we can build these models, so what? And I'd say the next set of talks are really pouring a little bit of cold water on all of this AI excitement, especially when it comes to applying these tools to the clinical bedside. One, I heard a really important point that AI performance, model performance, does not equate to clinical utility or to improve patient outcomes by itself. In a lot of ways, this is not an engineering problem, but what I've heard is that there's three other fields we need to think about. We need to think about sociology, psychology, and economics. For sociology, we need to understand how this algorithm is deployed into a complex organizational workflow that has both upstream and downstream consequences. In terms of psychology, even if an algorithm works, do clinicians trust it or do patients trust it? We heard that we might be able to forgive an error of a colleague, but we're much less forgiving of an error from a computer. And also, I think about this a lot when it comes to diagnosis, is how do these algorithms change or modify our sense of self? As an internal medicine doc, I do diagnosis and give treatments, and so when an algorithm is trying to do the same thing, how does that modify my own sense of professional competency? And lastly, we think about economics. What are the financial incentives for this type of work? We heard an amazing talk by Daphne Kohler, and I did a little bit of Googling, and I learned that her company raised $400 million in its last round. And I compare that to just 2 talks later, where we heard about the amazing opportunity to be able to diagnose every patient with a monogenic disease. And what's the barrier? It's not a technical barrier, it's one of financial incentives. The third set of talks, we heard the exceptional efforts of building infrastructure and governance that are being developed at the healthcare system level. We heard about Duke and UCSF. And according to Mark Sendek's metaphor, these are islands that are helping us demonstrate what is possible. But what I worry about is that even if we were to clone 50 Mark Sendeks, 50 Sarah Murrays, we still would have not enough infrastructure or expertise to really help with the last mile of clinical AI implementation. What worries me is developing or exacerbating this have and have not systems between care delivery systems like Stanford, Mayo, Duke, UCSF, and the rest of healthcare in the United States. And so I really believe that we need a new field around the implementation science of clinical AI, really thinking through these nuances of clinical AI deployment. One way that we could do it is we could upskill existing infrastructure at the hospital, the quality improvement experts. So while everyone may not have a computer science department, I can assure you every hospital has a quality improvement program or department. And so how do we upskill that infrastructure, which is already focused around change management and implementation of tools, and apply it to the implementation of AI tools? And lastly, we heard about talks covering the issues of algorithmic bias and health equity. From Sarah Murray, we heard that algorithms by themselves do not harm patients or do not create disparities in health outcomes. It's what humans do with those predictions. For example, predicting no-show rates is by itself pretty harmless. It's what we do with that information or what health systems do with that information that might either mitigate or exacerbate these disparities. We also heard from Roxana the importance of ensuring that the data sets we use to train these algorithms reflect populations that the algorithm is deployed upon, not just the populations that are contributing to these data assets. And then we heard about the example of the MIMIC data set. And what really strikes me here is not how amazing the MIMIC data set is or the Stanford AIMI data sets, but how rare those examples are. Everyone's still publishing on those data sets, whereas healthcare delivery systems across the country have similar quality data. And why are there not 100 of these data sets out there? I think in order for us to figure that out, we have to both understand the financial incentives. We heard that right now, healthcare systems can profit off of their healthcare data, so why give something for free that you could profit off of? There's also risks of liability. No one wants to share their data and be the next New York Times front page about sharing patient data. I think the challenge for the field really is that we heard from Greg that the data is out there. It's just a matter of creating the right incentives and the technical infrastructure to make data sharing and aggregation the easy thing to do. And lastly, we just heard right now, we were reminded of the critical importance of putting thoughtful guardrails around how clinical AI is both developed and deployed. We have the legal system, we also have the regulatory system that provide these guardrails, but what we know is that these systems are often reactive, they're very slow to act, and we also heard that they tend to focus on specific use cases as opposed to generalized principles. And so who fills that gap while the regulators, while the legal system figures out what to do? That's actually all of you here in this room. I don't want to put too much pressure on all of you, but really I think that this is a community effort to figure these things out and to advance the state of the science. So thank you for this opportunity to share my remarks.
Thank you, Daniel, for that wonderful summary. And with that, we would now like to bring the AIMI Symposium to a close. Thank you for everyone for joining in person. It was fabulous to see everyone in real life. Thank you to everyone who attended the presentation and the symposium online. We look forward to doing this again next year. We'll have a reception outside, so please join us. Enjoy the California sun. We'll be sharing all the recorded videos online in the near future, and we'll also be sending out an event survey. So if you had any thoughts about what you thought about the event, how we could improve it, please fill out the survey so we can host an even better event next year. But with that, thank you all for coming.
Right, and also thank you to all of the staff who have helped us put together this program and made today possible.
Thank you.